This video is on individualism. What is individualism? Well, individualism is the fact that in this society, to some degree, we are encouraged to be ourselves. And we are given freedoms that allow us to be ourselves. We have freedom of religion, and freedom to gather, and freedom of speech. We have a lot of basic rights that allow us to develop our own unique talents and be ourselves. We can say what we believe and what we think, and we can be different. We can be unique. And I think this is a value that's a very basic value in American society, is this value, we'll call it, of individualism. You see it a lot of times in like movies where we have the hero, the great hero, the great woman or man who overcomes all obstacles and succeeds. So we have it in all these hero movies, in Superman and in Superwoman and in Wonder Woman, and don't they have one called The Flea? Or The Ant? They have The Ant, right? The Ant. Well, maybe we'll have The Flea next. We have all these superhero movies out there, and all of these push this idea of individualism and how great we can be if we just try our best. And that leads easily into the obvious strengths of this value and its benefits. And one of them is that it encourages us to do our best, and that it says, hey, we can all do it. And we see examples all the time of people raised in poverty and who rise up to be very successful, to become world famous lawyers and doctors and sociologists. And sociologists, I had to say that, right? In other words, individualism encourages us to try to achieve great heights and great things in our lives. And we have, a lot of us have, a lot of people do. This is good. Related to that, individualism, we see it where people accomplish great feats in different ways. People who have disabilities sometimes are able to say, hey, I can accomplish great feats. There was a man who I read about several years ago who climbed Mount Whitney, the highest mountain in the 48 states, in the lower 48 states, in a wheelchair. Now, I'm going to bet that there are a lot of people out there, a lot of you who couldn't climb that mountain ordinarily, and you imagine this guy did it in a wheelchair. There are people with prosthetic legs who may be missing one leg, who run marathons. Marathons are 26 miles. I bet a lot of you out there couldn't run 26 miles, and you have two good legs. Imagine these accomplishments. So we look at this and we say, look at all of their great accomplishments this value encourages. Another good thing about the value is that we need it for democracy. It's a basic value for democracy. Unless you give people freedom to say what they believe, to agree or disagree with the president, to agree or disagree with me, the teacher. People have to have freedoms if you're going to have a democracy. And also, I think another good thing about this value is innovation. Because we have these freedoms, people innovate. They try new things. They try different things. And sometimes these innovations are very important for society, because society grows through innovations. So when we look at this value, some people say, what could be negative about a value like this? What could be a problem? And there are issues, and we can call them problems, but whatever, drawbacks. But there are issues that you have to accept. One of them is, and it's on your thought paper that you're doing for the class, Mr. Colin Kaepernick. Mr. Colin Kaepernick, been kneeling when he was playing football. He's not playing anymore right now, as a way of protesting. And this has offended some people. But when you have a value of individualism that says you have a right to speak out and you have a right to disagree, people are going to speak out and disagree in many ways. And you may not always agree with their way of speaking out, and you may not always agree with what they're complaining or what they're protesting about. But you have a value that allows people to do this. And you have to be careful, because if you stop people from protesting and speaking out, you get into censorship, you get into control, and you may lose the freedom that is essential in a democracy, and that is the freedom to disagree. And maybe disagree in a way that maybe we always all don't agree with how you're doing it, but boom. I do not agree with the KKK. I don't. But you know what? They have a right to say what they believe. It's part of the basic freedoms. Because if you take away their freedom to speak, you might be taking away everybody else's if you're not careful. And that's one of the issues with this thing. Another issue with this value, and this is a strange one, is that in order to give people freedoms, you have to limit the power of police. You cannot give police blanket power to go in and stop and arrest and search anybody out there, And in other words, what's going to happen is this value is going to, I think, it has caused us to have a society that says, look, the government officials can only do so much. We have freedoms, we have rights. We limit the power of the government and the police. Now, this can create some problems because, maybe sometimes there are criminals that get away with things because we can't just pull over everybody who looks like they might be a criminal. I've gotten pulled over, believe it or not, because people thought I was a criminal. Me, of all people, right? So we limit police powers. We limit police powers. And that's an issue because some people feel that maybe criminals get away. So who knows? Okay. Finally, and this is an interesting one, I call it the overemphasis on the cult of individual achievement. Now, what does that mean? Sometimes this cult of individual achievement that I talked about is a positive thing with this value. Remember, people who are poor accomplishing great things, people who have disability accomplishing great things, and many other examples. While there's a good side to this cult of individual achievement, there's a negative side. And the negative side, one is behavior that maybe is foolish. We had these movies out a few years ago called Jackass 1, Jackass 2, Jackass 3, and whatever they were called. And they were all people trying to do crazy stunts. A few years ago, I heard this story on TV where this person was crossing the border, I think coming into the United States from Mexico, and they refused to go over and get inspected. They started to speed off, and the agent, whoever he or she was, jumped on the car door and tried to get control of the car. But sadly, unfortunately, the person sped away and the agent lost their grip, fell on the ground and died. And they said this on TV. And at first I thought, this is sad. And then I asked myself, why did the agent jump onto the car? And I started thinking this value of individualism and the overemphasis on the cult of individual achievement. What do I mean? Here's the thing. We kind of think individuals can accomplish a lot of stuff. So like we present this in a movie, okay? In a movie, here's what happens. That agent would have jumped on that car would have sped off, they would have had a fight, they would have been punching, and there would have been somebody crossing the street, and the agent would have turned the wheel just in time while he's fighting the person while hanging onto the door, and then the car is speeding down the road, and is heading toward grandma, pushing her little grandbaby, and the car is going to hit him and kill him. The last minute, the agent jumps in the car, pops the guy on the nose, and stops the car 2 feet from grandma and the baby. That's the movie of individual achievement. But in real life, unfortunately, the agent falls off the car and dies. We got to be careful that we think we're all Superman and Superwoman or whatever, and that we can do all these fantastic things. Because not everybody can. Not everybody in a wheelchair can climb Mount Whitney. Not everybody with a prosthetic leg is going to run 26 miles. We can't do it. Sometimes it leads to foolish behavior, like in the case of these Jackass movies, and maybe foolish behavior in trying to jump on that car and stop that person who didn't stop at the border. To the mistaken belief that everybody can accomplish fantastic feats like climbing a mountain in a wheelchair. That's hard. I'm not too sure I could climb Mount Whitney. A lot of people probably could. We also have to keep this in mind about that value and that cult of individual achievement. Sometimes we think that individuals can do so much on their own, they don't need help from other people and society. And you've got to ask yourself, do we need help from each other? How many of us can say we make it through life without ever getting help from other people, from society? In other words, if you have an overemphasis on the cult of individual achievement, it may lead you to the mistaken belief that people don't need help, that the government shouldn't help people, that we don't want to give people assistance in going to school, that maybe we don't need to provide all these welfare programs and these free lunches because it's going to make people lazy. What we need to do is just tell them, do it on your own. And this sometimes comes from this value of individualism and the belief, I think a mistaken belief, that we don't need help. Because I'm going to argue that most of us, if not all of us, at some point in our life, get help from somebody. Now, it may not always be the government, but it might be somebody else. It might be parents who are wealthy. That's help. It might be somebody an employer who gives us a break and allows us to adjust our schedule so that we can go to school. Somebody who loans you money. Or it might be the government who says, hey, we're going to help pay for your tuition to go to college. So let's summarize this value of individualism. The good side is that we get innovation. People try new things. It's a basis for democracy, which is very, very important. And then we get this cult of individual achievement in a positive way in which people accomplish fantastic feats. These feats can be rising from poverty in a poor neighborhood and becoming a world famous doctor or lawyer, or it could be a person who has a disability who proves to themselves and to the rest of us that people with disabilities can accomplish great things, and these are great. But then we get the negative side of this value, or the issues, and one is that it's going to make law enforcement more difficult because we got to respect the rights of people. 2, you're going to get unpopular behavior, or you may get behavior you don't like because people are going to tell you what they think, and they may not always agree with you, and they may protest, and you have to accept that if you're going to give people freedom. Otherwise, you get into censorship. And then finally, you get an overemphasis on the cult of individual achievement. And what I mean by that is sometimes people try foolish things. They do things they shouldn't do, and they get themselves hurt or killed. Okay, that's a problem with it. We also have to keep in mind that not everybody can run a marathon, and that not everybody can climb a mountain. Not all of us. We can't all do these fantastic things, and that doesn't mean that we're not successful or good people, because not everybody can do it, but you can still be a good, successful person even if you can't accomplish this. And finally, the problem with an overemphasis on the cult of individual achievement is the fact that we may forget that most, if not all of us, at some point in our lives need help from other people, that we rarely make it totally on our own. So that is the value of individualism.